beautiful up here. Here we are in nature. I'd like to clear up a misconception most people have about nature. For instance, I said here we are in nature. At least we're here in biological nature. But what does that mean? When people say, well, you know, we like to be in nature. I believe it's kind of a misconception. Nature, in my opinion, is the great machine, the only true matrix. Everything else falls under that category. So, in reality, you can never really be separate from nature. When people come out here in the woods or in environment, undisturbed ecosystem, they equate that with that's nature, and somehow they're going to go back away from that, separate from nature. So how does that work? Well, I guess you could start off with my concept of what a human being actually is. I believe a human being is kind of a dualistic entity by nature. In my opinion, a human being is a psychological life form existing inside of a biochemical organism. And what do I mean by that? Just what exactly is a psychological life form? Well, you know, down through the ages, people picked up on that. I believe they refer to it as a soul, spirit, for lack of better words. I'm very scientific, and in my view, which by the way, I'm a global thinker. If any of you out there know what a global thinker is, it's not just somebody who thinks about the globe. It's a certain type of brain, a certain type of thinking. I talked to my friend's psychologist once, and she seemed to think that I had an Asperger's brain. There's a view of my ridges. There's this one. There's one there, one behind it, and there's one behind that I usually hike. And they kind of get harder at first and then come back. But anyway, back to psychological life form. And like I say, there's no escaping nature. I mean, the military-industrial complex, the egregious organizations, they all follow patterns. It all comes from nature. And in my opinion, there really is only two problems. Either lack of understanding or lack of knowledge or respect for nature. Either lack of knowledge or lack of respect for nature. So when people come to conclusions that exclude nature, like man's technology, for instance, That is part of man's evolution, which is natural. I believe it was Ray Kurzweil that tied human evolution to exponential change. In other words, for thousands of years, we started off slowly, and we're now approaching that exponential curve, going towards what many people believe is a singularity. Now, this formula is straight out of nature. I mean, it happens in the environment. Gravity follows an exponential curve when it's subjected to a black hole. But so, what is a psychological life form? It is the non-material. It's produced, I believe it's produced from the trillions of parts, cells, from the biochemical organism. That's like the generator that produces the hologram, the human hologram, the psychological life form, the non-tangible. It's non-material. However, it's not non-biological. Even though it's non-material, it follows biological patterns. In fact, if you want to really understand nature, nature has a code, a key to unlocking nature. What is it? It's patterns, repeating patterns. If you look into quantum physics, cosmology, biology, it's just repeating patterns. These trees are infinitely complex. Try to duplicate one exactly. However, they're produced from just a few patterns, few shapes, repeated over and over again, thousands of different combinations. So, back to the psychological life form existing inside of a biochemical organism. Once you understand that foundation and you understand the repeating patterns, take a look at what's happening today. Why people are so confused about man's role in nature or lack thereof. Large oil companies producing oil spills, large nuclear concerns producing radiation, radioactive isotopes in reactors, poisoning the environment, ecosystem. Well, let's project our theory about patterns. So if a human being is a psychological life form that mimics biological patterns, what's going on with these large organizations? Monsanto, the cancer industrial complex, military industrial complex. What's going on with that? Well, I call them collective psychological organisms. Again, mimicking biology. So what's a collective psychological organism? It is an organization that is got the fundamentals of life, actually, and has become predatory. When things in nature are introduced, like foreign bodies, or there's a huge reorganization, ecosystems are disturbed, and I believe that's what's happened with mankind. What do I mean by that? So, you take an ecosystem, for instance, take a lake, a pond, and a bird deposits an organism that's foreign to that environment, like a prolific water plant. And we've seen the scenario before. The organism propagates in the environment and it seemingly destroys it. In the instance of the lake, it'll be overpopulated, but eventually it will achieve an equilibrium. It will balance out. In the case of the lake, maybe it won't be a lake. It'll turn into a grassland. Similarly, with mankind, man is relatively new to the environment, and when we were first introduced to the environment, we were, the same as any other animal. However, it's man's consciousness that is the new seed in the environment of the global ecosystem. And so, the entire environment has been thrown off by that seed. Keep in mind that consciousness produced from the organism. Remember the repeating patterns, it's the same as an individual projected out, and tells the story of something new in the environment, man's consciousness. It's not separate from nature, introduced to nature, it's part of nature, and it has produced not just the psychological life form, as in a single person, but collectively it's produced collective psychological organisms, and it's taken on the qualities of life, and life is a very, very powerful pattern in the universe. Otherwise we wouldn't be here. Life exists, the ocean depths, underground, pretty tenacious. So if that pattern jumps into a psychological organism, that's a powerful pattern, and it has, when it becomes predatory, that's what you have. That's what you have in the world today. And the people have the propensity of becoming cells in that organism. And this is confirmed by a great man. His name is Bruce Lipton. He was a biologist. And this is his belief that we have become cells in what I call psychological organisms. And it's just a pattern in nature, a repeating pattern. Here we are, top of the hill. We came up from the bottom down there, followed this ridge all the way, and my dog is just about burned out. I told him. So I believe that's kind of sums it up about my philosophy about our status, our condition. So people form these psychological organisms, and let's take a extreme case like a cult. They're so enamored, so taken in by this organism, and keep in mind there's a propensity for people to do that. They lose their identity. You could talk to them and it seems like you're not really talking to an individual. You're talking to somebody who's indoctrinated into this system, and their every move is part of that system, not an individual act necessarily. So in today's day and age, it's all around us. We see it impacting the ecosystem, and people don't seem to have an idea why that is. Well, now you do. So what's going to become of this? Well, remember the repeating patterns. What's going to become of it is that eventually it will balance out. And following the teachings of Bruce Lipton, he said that, which I believe, is that eventually the organism will become the earth. And from a wide perspective that I seem to come from, that makes total sense to me. The earth is the new organism. So how's that going to play out? You have all these psychological organisms roaming the earth, preying upon people. What's going to stop them? Well, repeating patterns. Remember the dinosaurs. The dinosaurs were specialists in their environment. And what was that environment? Most of the earth was like tropical. They were the top of the food chain. So what happened? They believe a meteor struck the Yucatan Peninsula, asteroid, and the impact changed the atmosphere, changed the environment. So when that happened, the specialists of that environment died off, and they just so happened to be the top predator. So they died off. So let's superimpose that pattern into modern day. What's happening today? Well, the environment is changing. There seems to be a paradigm shift from the old world order to the actual new world order. And what is that? Like Bruce Lipton said, it's the earth, the new organism. And so how is that going to play out? How does that relate to the dinosaurs? Well, the atmosphere that the dinosaurs propagated in was a tropical environment, literally the atmosphere of the earth. So these psychological organisms, what atmosphere do they propagate in? You and me. They're a product of the combined psychology of of humans on this earth. And right now, I believe that atmosphere is changing. And so when it does change, the dinosaurs, psychological organisms, will die off. And I believe that's the point we're at right now. Pretty cool, huh? It's just nature. That's all it is. Patterns in nature. So, when you're out in the wilderness and you say, well, I'm out in nature. Guess what? When you're in the city, you're out in nature too. It all comes from the same place. So let's recap. You have the original ecosystem, the global ecosystem of the earth. And that was fine for a while. And we know that repeating patterns in nature starts off with very simple patterns, branches out to complex interactions of patterns, repeating patterns. And the original ecosystem used to have its share of chaos. It came from chaos. Actually, the whole thing comes from the dispensation of broken symmetry, but we'll get into that. That's another discussion. So you have your original ecosystem, global ecosystem, and man evolved from that. Just another animal, right? But the animal man was given particular amount of time to evolve into intelligent life. Thanks to Jupiter, our guardian. You guys could look that one up. I'm not going off in a tangent about Greek gods, but Jupiter is most likely responsible for giving us enough time to evolve into an intelligent species. So you have the global ecosystem, an intelligent species evolves, and from that species a higher consciousness evolved from nature. Remember, nature being the ultimate matrix, nothing escapes it, everything comes from it. So it produced man, who is himself a psychological life form existing inside of a biochemical organism, the biochemical organism generating enough power to produce the human hologram. And so there you have it. You have this new organism, a psychological organism, introduced into the environment. And like the lake being choked off by a foreign organism, the global ecosystem has been affected by this event in nature, this new life form organism I call psychological organisms. So together, the psychological organisms produce a psychological environment that produces collective psychological organisms. Your Monsantos, your military industrial complexes, your religions, and they have a propensity, just like a biological organism, to become predatory. And so you have these gigantic predators, organisms roaming the earth, just like the dinosaurs, affecting the environment, just like the lake. And so what happened to the lake? Eventually it turned into a grassland, let's say. Turned into a grassland or swamp, but it balanced out. It became a balanced ecosystem eventually. So what's happening here? Eventually, the psychological organisms will become extinct and make way for the new paradigm, which I agree with Bruce Lipton is the earth, biological, the new organism. And it makes sense that we form the brain of the earth. So there may be some conflicting ideas that, well, we don't have to do that. Remember, there really is only two problems, either lack of understanding or lack of respect for nature. So eventually nature will win out. You know, people think, oh, we're going to be robots or, you know, all these things. Well, actually, people kind of have a misunderstanding about extinction. 99.9% of all creatures have become extinct, and people have a bad sense of what extinction is. They think that we're going to die off, a plague, but there's one form of extinction that is actually preferable and should be sought after. That sounds crazy, doesn't it? To seek after extinction. But what I'm talking about is evolutionary extinction, which is passing on the torch. It's not being wiped out. Again, people have this two-dimensional thought about what a human being is. First, I explained that we're psychological life forms existing inside of a biochemical organism. So we got that. But a human is a transitory being. They have this two-dimensional idea that humans were placed as humans and animals, but in reality, you have this transition. It's like a wave of evolution. And so, you know, we had predecessors. We had Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon, and so here we are. And we are now ready to pass on the torch, and not necessarily to robots, but robots again follow that pattern. I mean artificial. I'm talking about, when I say robots, I'm talking about artificial intelligence. And so, getting into that, by the time we have that technology, we most likely will have the same access to the same intelligence. So there won't be an us versus them necessarily, in my opinion. But so there it is, the human condition, where transitory beings, or psychological life forms, has formed. We formed collective psychological organisms. And if you look closely around here in biology, you're going to find all of those patterns. All of them are here in biology. And it's just repeating it in the realm of consciousness. And so we go forward achieve some kind of a singularity, reach another level of balance and equilibrium, then things get mixed up again, and we follow that natural pattern. So there it is, and here we are. It's a beautiful journey. And as far as technology, let me throw in a few things. So what we believe, remember, nature always wins out. What we believe is technology right now, we think that we're so high in technology. And this is key, this is important for you guys to understand, for people to understand this, that we're not really at the pinnacle of technology right now, because a lot of our technology is cash cows for the psychological organisms, meaning that, for instance, a car is a cash cow for the oil companies, cash cow for the auto manufacturers, and all the technologies. So why don't I think those are advanced? Well, because the purpose is not technology. The purpose is to feed the organisms that produce the technology. So when the earth transitions into the organism, for instance, we don't need oil. We don't need the technology of oil for the sake of supporting an organism, an oil company. No, instead, we have solar power. What's a solar powered car? There's no solar powered car, but there's enough solar power to power everything. There's a fellow back east, he powers his car, his house, everything solar power. How's he do that? He has a solar array of panels. In turn, that feeds a hydrogen generator. The hydrogen generator produces the gas, the hydrogen needed to power his car. His car is so powerful, by the way, it can power his entire house. And so he's doing that all within a small square footage of area. And so there you have it. The house, the car, everything powered by solar power. But so instead of having these technologies that feed these entities, for instance, the nuclear power needing to feed the military-industrial complex, it's uranium, plutonium, or whatever. We don't need that horrible power that produces incredibly horrible waste that we can't get rid of, that's poisoning the environment right now. We don't need that. Instead, our mind is free, our technology is free to advance forward without being having these parasites leeching on to the technology for its sustenance. So that's what I mean by the technology that we have right now is not that advanced. It's not. It would be advanced. Like I say, nature eventually wins out. If we're in harmony with nature, with the great machine, things run a lot smoother and more efficient. We ourselves benefit, our health, our technology. I mean, we have better things to do than feed a bunch of organizations. You ever wonder, some of these drives, cure this, cure that, they've done studies, and all the money and proceeds go to the organization, and nothing really goes to it's just for the sake of the organization, the psychological, collective psychological life forms. So there it is in a nutshell. And the more we understand it, the more we understand nature and the true matrix, it always wins out, So basically, that's the true path, And we can't, instead of fighting it and painfully fighting it, we can understand it and benefit from it. So I'm going to do some, here we are in the beautiful ecosystem. I'm going to do a few videos in places that people think that nature doesn't exist. Well, you guys have a surprise. Anyway, here we are, top of the hill.